Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this is Taking Care of Business. Joining me today is Peter Coffey, who is Vice President for Strategic Research for Salesforce. Thanks for joining us today, Peter.
It's great to be with you.
Let's talk about manufacturing and some of the impact the pandemic, first of all, has had and continues to have on that industry, and maybe some trends to look forward to as we approach 2022. But first of all, Peter, let's talk about that impact. What impact overall has the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic, had on the manufacturing sector here in Canada?
The two main impacts that this has had have been acceleration. In many cases, Canadian CIOs have told me that what was previously a 2-year timetable for a digital transformation vision quickly had to be accelerated to something like a 2-week minimum viable product and a 2-month deployment to maintain availability of product, and a significant shift from the prior decade of cost optimization and just-in-time supply chain design into something where resilience and flexibility and accommodation of change became higher priorities than they had been. People realized they'd constructed highly optimized, but ultimately quite brittle and fragile systems. And so there's a new thinking now that things have to be able to happen more quickly, but also have to be more resilient in the face of what's now understood not to be exceptional events. It's an ongoing series of exceptional events.
Yeah.
And the comment made by Tom Peters back in 1987 that you have to thrive on chaos, not thrive in spite of chaos, not thrive until we get over the chaos, thrive in an environment of rapid change and the ability to deal with the unpredictable, but not the unforeseeable.
Yeah. When you look at the manufacturing sector, what do companies need to do to stay competitive in this changing environment?
The degree to which we're rethinking what supply chains need to be about and to stop tolerating what have been long established practices in areas like even just shipping and billing. For example, migration to something like a distributed ledger platform, sometimes referred to as a blockchain, although that's a special case, that allow for radically improved accuracy and timeliness and awareness of where things are and who's being paid for what. As we move to an environment in which more products have a services offering wrapped around them, and typically this involves an ecosystem of providers, arranging for them all to get paid promptly, accurately, without dispute is something that requires a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes. And fortunately, the platforms are available to enable that. The other challenge is one of talent, because the degree to which manufacturing employers now need to compete for a labor force that is more aware than ever of its choices and may have a mistaken impression that manufacturing is an old economy and that that's not where your high potential talent should go. I try to remind people, if you pick up that smartphone you're holding in your hand, the huge fraction of the non-radioactive elements in the periodic table are in that device. The ability to manufacture the devices that make the magic seem to happen is an important area. And I feel that the manufacturing community needs to do a better job of pumping up the appeal and the opportunity that manufacturing talent represents.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk a little bit about that labor shortage, and I hear it, in Canada everywhere. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business recently sounded the alarm about labor shortages right across the board. Obviously that impacts the productivity of companies, which obviously then impacts the domino effect for the overall economy. But in the manufacturing center, how did we get to this point? Like, what are the main factors contributing to that I guess crisis? No, I shouldn't say crisis, but concerns that we have in this sector for labor and finding people.
There is the old expression about things happen slowly, then all at once.
Yeah.
And what we saw during the last 2 years was really just the crystallization of forces that had been happening for quite some time. I've talked about the degree to which industries like financial services and electronic gaming and social media platforms were bleeding off a lot of the great tech talent that used to look forward to going into a manufacturing occupation.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that the people you wanted to have, 10, 15, 20 years experience, well, that's a pipeline that takes 10, 15, 20 years. And you suddenly discover you don't have the team leaders and the mentors and the plant manager talent pool available to you. And trying to rebuild that, well, that doesn't happen quickly. So it's important to be thinking about these things as a relatively long-term process. What happened during pandemic is that Canada and many of the world's industrial economies essentially conducted a sudden unplanned experiment in providing universal basic income. And when people had that safety net that was provided with really impressive speed and community spirit in many economies, what has been shown is that people don't take advantage of that as an opportunity not to work, but they do take advantage of it as an opportunity to acquire additional education and to seek improved conditions of work. Manufacturing jobs have not traditionally been associated with comfort, safety, or prestige, or high pay. And so something I've said many times is that employers tend to think of employees as if they were suppliers. You buy their labor, you pay them with money. You kind of need to turn that around. They're buying their paycheck with something that you would call the best years of their lives. They are purchasing their paycheck with their time. Your employee is not a supplier. Your employee is a customer, and they can take their valuable resource of the time they'll use. They can take that now to more places than they ever could before. They can even be looking for a new job while working at their laptop at home while they're working from home. They can be literally interviewing 3 different employers in a 15-minute break. That notion that we need to compete for our labor instead of just purchasing our labor is, I think, somewhat new to many companies.
Yeah. When you look at some of the issues that we are faced with these days from the supply chain point of view, and there's so many factors that go involved into that, including natural disasters like we've seen in BC, and what impact do all these concerns over supply chain and last mile have on the manufacturing sector overall?
The degree to which we need to be designing for multiple sources, less emphasis on end-to-end optimization, more emphasis on rapid adaptability and resilience, more real-time information. I mean, one of the things that we established during the incident with the boat in the Suez Canal is that in many cases, the supply chain was really quite opaque. You had some idea of when it had been put into a steel box and some idea of when it showed up on your loading dock. And the process in between needs to be much better instrumented for a number of factors. Number one, not only knowing where things are, knowing that they've been subject to proper handling in terms of things like shock and temperature and other things. We're moving very complicated and fragile objects around. We just saw the incident where the James Webb Space Telescope had a clamping band released prematurely while it was being handled and about to be put on top of the rocket. And that's just a particularly vivid example that the system has to provide protection and custody for things end to end and must be capable of being audited at every point. We've used these systems from our own Salesforce technology to do things like make sure that the cold chain is preserved in vaccine delivery. You can't freeze the stuff, but you can't let it get above a certain temperature. It ceases to be viable. And we've had people use our collaboration fabric as a real-time system for being able to assure with a very simple, now very inexpensive sensor and global wireless platform. This is capability that used to be the province of national governments. And now any small manufacturer can be taking advantage of these kinds of things. And this is really key. The minimum size that you need to be a viable global manufacturing player has become far smaller. It is so much easier now for a small talented team to bring forward an offering and be discoverable globally and be able to participate globally. And I think that's one of the most important messages for Canadian manufacturers, is that Canada brands don't need to settle for being Canada brands, North America brands, Western Hemisphere brands. They can be global brands now at a size that they might not have thought made that possible 10 years ago.
Okay. Now, when you look at, obviously, with some of these issues that we've talked about, the labor issue, the supply chain issue, does it become increasingly more important for these manufacturers to embrace technology, to embrace digitization in how they operate?
It's crucial that people understand that the technology is available, expected by their customer, necessary to their competitiveness. But the problem, I've said on many occasions, is the label digital transformation has two errors, the adjective and the noun. Digital makes it sound like it's a technology adoption challenge, and transformation makes it sound like it's a step change from one level of capability to another. Digital is a manner of integrating and repurposing data, not just having silos that capture the byproducts of your own activity. And the transformation must be from an organization that moves in large discontinuous jumps of capital change to one that is continuously transforming, that is undergoing a process of continual feedback and correction. It's more like flying a fighter jet than it is like building a pyramid.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks very much, Peter. That was great. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about the manufacturing industry and technology and where we're going. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. That was Peter Coffey, who is Vice President of Strategic Research for Salesforce. This has been Mario Toneguzzi and Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.